Have you ever heard of a doctor risking everything to save a patient's life? I was just starting my nursing career when I met Dr. Chen. He was this brilliant surgeon who had a reputation for being both fiercely respected and slightly feared. He had this quiet intensity about him, didn't waste time, didn't tolerate shortcuts, and never left a shift until he'd done everything humanly possible for his patients. I'd never seen anyone so relentlessly focused on saving lives. One night, we admitted a 7-year-old girl named Mia. She had a rare, degenerative blood disorder that none of the previous hospitals she'd been to knew how to treat. Her parents were exhausted and terrified. They'd already been turned away by 5 hospitals. Their daughter was deteriorating by the hour. Dr. Chen took her case without hesitation and immediately began researching every possible option. It became personal for him. You could see it. After reviewing her charts and previous failed treatments, he proposed an experimental procedure that hadn't yet been approved for pediatric use. It was high risk, expensive, and not covered under insurance. When he brought it to the hospital board, they denied it flat out. Too dangerous. No published outcomes. Not worth the liability. I watched Dr. Chen argue with them for hours behind closed doors. You could hear his voice through the walls, controlled but furious. When he finally emerged, he looked like a man who had just lost something. I thought that was the end of it. Later that night, I went to check on Mia and found Dr. Chen already in her room. He had quietly brought in surgical equipment and was prepping the meds and devices himself. His hands were steady, but his eyes looked tired in a way I'd never seen before. "I'm doing the procedure anyway," he said. "I'll probably lose my license, maybe worse. But I can't sit here and watch her die knowing I didn't try. I should have reported him. That was what the rules said." Instead, I closed the door, tied my hair back, and helped. The procedure took 6 hours. There were moments where I didn't think she'd make it. Her vitals dropped, alarms went off, and twice we had to resuscitate. But somehow, we kept going. Just after sunrise, her stats began to stabilize. We were drenched in sweat, emotionally wrung out, but we'd done it. She was alive. Then the worst happened. The hospital administrator walked in. Clipboard in hand, eyes wide. I braced for the fallout. It was over. We were finished. But instead, she stared at Mia, then at Dr. Chen. After a long pause, she quietly said, "I never saw this," and walked out. I'll never forget that moment. The silence, the weight of it. Mia survived. Not just survived, she recovered. The treatment worked better than anyone had predicted. A week later, she was sitting up, smiling, and asking for popsicles. Of course, an internal investigation followed. Dr. Chen was immediately suspended, but then something strange happened. The hospital board suddenly reversed its stance. Records appeared showing that the procedure had been approved after all. A backdated signature here, an official email thread there. The scandal disappeared as quietly as it had started. It took me years to find out why. The hospital administrator's daughter had died from the exact same condition 5 years earlier. She hadn't gotten there in time. No doctor had been willing to take the risk. So when she saw Dr. Chen trying to save a child with the same diagnosis, she made her choice. She couldn't save her own kid, but she made sure we could save someone else's. Dr. Chen still practices medicine to this day. He doesn't talk about that night. Neither do I. But I still get a card every December. Mia just graduated college last year.